will be poorer without this model code of conduct. The model code of conduct has now become a perfect alibi, a perfect pretense, a perfect cover for not doing regular things and for doing things which are utterly trivial.
In your column, you said that what we need is an EC with a spine.
This government simply doesn't believe in any institution having even the slightest autonomy. Even if they accuse you, you are sitting in an independent institution. There is certain dignity to the institution that you hold. You cannot respond like a combatant. You cannot respond like a party.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Deshkaal. My name is Pooja Pillai. I have with me Yogendra Yadav, noted political scientist and political activist. In his latest column for the Indian Express, he has taken the very interesting and sharp stance of saying junk the model code of conduct. Now, sir, let's plunge right into it. Um, do you think the model code of conduct has never served a purpose at all?
Frankly, Pooja, this article did begin with an element of despair. I've been to Maharashtra just before the election, and I watched what was happening there. As you know, in the last 2 months or so, Maharashtra government has made about announcements worth about 1 lakh crore rupees. Something similar has been done in Jharkhand. You see the kind of exchanges that are taking place. All this has become absolutely routine norm of our politics. We saw Mr. Hemant Biswa Sarma, the BJP in charge of Jharkhand and the Chief Minister of Assam, say absolutely brazenly something which should qualify as a criminal statement by way of inciting hatred against Muslims. But all this is all right, this is passing. So I started thinking, okay, what is the modern code of conduct doing? Our usual position is, oh, we have something lovely called the modern code of conduct. Unfortunately, it's not being implemented. And I started thinking about it, uh, reread the modern code of conduct, and asked myself, okay, so what is it that model code of conduct gives us, which is not available to us through the normal law of the land? Mind you, all of us have this impression that elections are governed by a model code of conduct. That's not true. Elections are governed by laws. There is a Representation of People's Act, which is the basic law that determines Indian elections. There is the normal law of the land. Criminal now, all these have got different new names now. But basically, there are laws about law and order, about governing what can you speak, about corruption, about taking money, about inciting violence. All these things are covered by normal laws. So, what is it that the Model Code of Conduct does in addition to that? I looked at the rationale. I understand the rationale. It's not that I don't understand the rationale. The idea was that over and above the law, you need norms, you need conventions, you need certain sense of do's and don'ts over and above the law. That is what the Moral Code of Conduct was meant to do. It was meant to introduce certain conventions. It recognized, for example, that ruling party may enjoy unfair advantage and said, okay, let's try and neutralize that. It said that, of course, you would not violate the law in public rallies, but you should also be decent. It says those things. Now, what has happened over the years is that model code of conduct now has kind of replaced all the laws. So the election commission and those who are regulating the elections feel they are not here to implement normal laws. They are basically here to implement the model code of conduct. Uh, and model code of conduct itself, far from being a norm, has been reduced to again the same rules. And actually, Election Commission has a compendium on model code of conduct. Last when I saw it, the compendium was more than 250 pages long, had more than 150 circulars. You were, of course, expected to read each of these circulars independently and understand what they mean. And I realized that over the years, the model code of conduct has now become a perfect alibi, a perfect pretense, a perfect cover for not doing regular things, and for doing things which are utterly trivial. As a journalist, you would have noticed, I'm old enough to know elections before all this happened, before the Sheshan era, and elections after that era. What does it mean to implement the model code of conduct? On a ground level, it means that whenever your car crosses a certain boundary, someone says, open your dicky, they go through the normal things and say, okay, you can go. It means that if your public meeting goes 5 minutes beyond 10 o'clock, someone comes and says, you are violating, you're doing this thing. It means that if you have a poster on a wall, someone comes on your supporters' wall. Someone says, have you taken a written permission? Have you filed this written permission? It means that every second day, someone says, have you filed this statement? Have you done this? So all it has done is that it has multiplied the paperwork. Has it done anything about the real things that need to be addressed? Has the model code of conduct helped us in any way in addressing the utterly foul, utterly irresponsible nature of public speech that has gone on, in which people occupying highest constitutional positions are involved? No. Has model code of conduct done anything about, for example, free distribution of liquor? No. Has model code of conduct helped us in any way in controlling routine things like voters being transported to the polling booth and back? No. Has model code of conduct helped us address any of the 20, 30, 40 things that it lists? No. So what does it achieve? It basically gives all the election of all the, not just election officers, the entire administration, a perfect governance holiday. Achar Sanhita lagu. Bas, then of course you can't expect anything. Even the routine certificates that you need, the most absolutely normal work, Achar Sanhita lagu. You can't get it done. And it creates this pretense that something is happening, that there is this grand code which is conducting our election, which provides a legitimacy, a cover for something that's not happening. So that's why I really felt, would we be poorer without this model code of conduct? What we have, if model code of conduct were not to be there, what would we have? We would have the law, Representation of People's Act. We would have the normal laws. And above all, don't forget, we have a constitutional sanction to the Election Commission of India under Article 324 to pretty much do whatever it wants to do to ensure free and fair elections. So the problem is not that the model code of conduct is not insufficiently strong, or we need to give more powers, we need to add more things to model code of conduct. The real problem is no one implements the regular laws. That Election Commission of India has lost spine, has lost credibility. No one takes it seriously. That is what needs to be addressed. Model code of conduct is at best harmless, but in all probability, it is more of a distraction, more of a disruption.
So I'm glad you mentioned TN Session because he was said to have used the model code of conduct very effectively. We also had S.Y. Qureshi ji, who also used to be Chief Election Commissioner, who in an idea exchange with us talked about how he used the model code of conduct, and he gave us an example of a time when there was some sort of acrimonious exchange with Prakash Singh Badal, and then Badalji ended up apologizing. Now, has something changed drastically in the political culture now? Would you say that the MCC has effectively become a toothless document, a toothless thing? Like it just doesn't work.
The change is not so much the political culture. The change is very much in the Election Commission of India. And let's be frank about it. We can't keep on beating about the bush. I must confess that I'm no great fan of Mr. Seshan. Personally, I really thought that this was a very, very Indian style of using an institution. in a way which violated all the norms and so on and so forth. But if you forget the person, if you look at the consequences of what he did, it brought a certain, the autonomy and independence of the election commission, which was envisaged in the constitution, but was never fully realized, is something that Mr. Session realized. He set up, he used the model code of conduct, but frankly, he could have done without model code of conduct as well, because as I said, basically what he used was Article 324, which said election commission has all the powers of superintendence, control, and governance of elections. And the matter went to the Supreme. And the Supreme Court said, yes, of course they have the power, as long as they're using it to conduct free and fair elections. So that is the real fountainhead, not so much the model code of conduct. Model code of conduct is not even a piece of law. I mean, it's a part of a certain accepted norms evolved by political parties. Those norms have collapsed, political parties, mutual understanding doesn't exist. But the worst thing is, election commission does not have moral authority. I would not say that it began only in 10 years ago. To my mind, Mr. J.M. Lingdo was the last election commissioner who exercised that kind of moral authority, that kind of certain stature. There were others too, and I'm not blaming everyone. But I think post Lingdo, a decline began. And what we had under the current regime, especially after the kind of situation that happened in 2019, do remember Mr. Ashok Lavasa, who was a member of the Election Commission, who was appointed by Modi government. I mean, he was not a Congress appointee, but who made the mistake of objecting to uh, some things that were being extraordinary things, a channel being launched in a Modi channel being launched right in the middle of the elections and so on. He simply put a note of dissent. And everyone knows what happened after that. I would not recount the whole thing, but basically he had to make a quiet exit. He was given a plum position outside India, went away, and then his family was spared. Everyone learned their lessons after that. We know the dubious situation in which the appointments to all the three election commissioners today were made. Earlier, we thought it was only one. We remember, we do know the Supreme Court in its order has recorded the strange manner in which the last election commissioner was appointed. Of course, he resigned thereafter, and another strange appointment was made overnight. But now, thanks to investigative journalists, we learned last week, that even the first two, including the current CEC, were appointed in a way which was rather strange. So, as a result of it, the Election Commission, which has been declining, and there were some not so not so decent appointment made in the pre-Modi era as well. People who were known to be close to the Congress party were appointed to the election commissioner. And sadly, one of the chief election commissioners was later became actually active in politics later on. So all this happened in the pre-Modi era as well. But after that, what we have witnessed is such a severe decline that no one trusts the election commission, and as a result, the overall process has suffered so much decline. And unfortunately, with every conduct, election commission goes on to affirm all the suspicions that people have about them. Take the latest statement by Hemant Biswa Sarma. Why should an election commission not issue a very severe notice? Why should he not be called to explain what he has said? And if what he said is objectionable, and on the face of it, it is objectionable, it's on record, it's not an allegation, it's in videos, then why no action against him? And if you don't take action against him, then next day you go to someone and say, you have violated model code of conduct. The person would just laugh at you. That's what's happening. That is where the real problem lies.
Right, right. So this you in fact in your column you said that what we need is an EC with a spine. You're also talking about this question of appointments of the election commissioners. In fact, we know there was a lot of controversy, particularly around the Act, the 2023 Act for the appointment of the election commissioners. Um, given this, like, what really is the way forward? Like, how do we have an election commission that does this job that is envisioned in the Constitution?
Well, the Supreme Court in its judgment had outlined a basic framework. The Supreme Court had basically said that the present method of appointment, in which the executive, the government of the day, basically appoints people of their liking. Supreme Court said this is not an acceptable method. You need to evolve an independent method. For the time being, Supreme Court said, okay, we are now creating a little framework, but you come up with a legislation. What does the government do? The government quickly comes up with a legislation which violates the spirit of the Supreme Court judgment, and then uses and before that can be challenged, the government makes an overnight appointment, the appointment of Mr. Arun Goyal, each step of which is recorded in the Supreme Court judgment. And the judgment says, how weird, can you do something like this? Now, that is what is happening. So in spite of the Supreme Court laying down clear norms about how it should be done, and basically the Supreme Court says it should be bipartisan. You have involved leader of opposition and involve the CJI. Now, involving the CJI doesn't necessarily make it neutral and so on, but at least the most fraudulent appointments, the most dubious appointments, the most controversial appointments, the most partisan appointments can possibly be filtered. There is no filter available right now. And this government simply doesn't believe in any institution having even the slightest autonomy. Now, the trouble is, if you do it to universities, it's one thing, it's very bad, but it's one thing. You do it to CBC, it's one thing. When you do it to the election commission, you're playing with fire. And the real danger is this, something that I mentioned in the last sentence or so. Just look around. Look at Bangladesh. Look at Pakistan. What happens there? Every single election outcome is disputed. Every time the opposition says it's fraudulent, we don't accept the results. And so basically, there is no decent democratic mechanism available for transfer of power. That's a very serious deadlock. Fortunately, in our country, we have not hit that point yet. There have been disputes, there have been allegations, but at least at a national level, I mean, Haryana election came close to that. But fortunately, we have not yet had a national election where the losing party comes to media and says, we do not accept the results. If that starts happening, we would have hit a point of no return in our democracy. And that's why I really wanted to underline that let's not get bogged down by this piece called Model Code of Conduct. It's a very minor piece. And if you really want to do something with it, there are 2 or 3 additional provisions which the law does not have. Make it a part of the law and move on. But let's focus on the real issue, namely election commission, which is independent, which is seen to be independent, which acts in ways which is independent. In the Session era, Session, Lingdo, even up to Mr. Qureshi's era, the election commission was independent, made an effort for public to see that it was independent, maintained that kind of legitimacy, which the election commission just doesn't do. The opposition party writes a letter to election commission, and the election commission responds. I mean, have you seen the language in which the election commission responds to the largest opposition party of this country? It reads like a BJP letter. I mean, for heaven's sake, you cannot do that. You cannot be party. If, granted, the opposition party writes a letter, accuses you of 5 things, which the Congress letter doesn't. But even if they accuse you, you are sitting in an independent institution. There is certain dignity to the institution that you hold. You cannot respond like a combatant. You cannot respond like a party. This is exactly what the election commission does. where would they get legitimacy? Who would take them seriously? This is a very serious crisis that we are moving towards.
Yogendra Yadav ji, I think you have given a lot of uh, food for thought to readers of your column and to viewers of this video. I believe a lot of people, like you pointed out, do not know this model code of conduct is not what we think it is. Thank you for drawing our attention to that. Um, I just want to know just one final thing, which is that is there any other way to is it, like what can be done at the level of the citizen, at the level of the voters, to you know highlight this issue, to sort of to make the EC more accountable? I suppose that is what I am asking. Like, how do what can be done? Like, what is really the solution?
At two levels. One is to make the EC accountable, where frankly our situation is very limited. In the last 6 months or so, many citizens organizations, some of which are very, very credible organizations, Association for Democratic Reforms, for example, is a long-standing institution which has asked questions to every ruling party, which has asked questions to every election commission. They have asked a very simple question. You know what's the question? They've asked the election commission, why is there a discrepancy between votes polled and votes counted? Now, is that not a legitimate question? And they say, sir, looking at your own data, in 536 out of 543 constituencies, one was not contested. So out of 542, there is a discrepancy. Why should there be a discrepancy even of one single vote? The election commission doesn't respond. There are cases where votes counted are less than votes polled. The election commission provides a semi-technical explanation for that. And there are constituencies where votes counted are more than votes polled. What on earth could be an explanation for that? Election commission doesn't respond. So I'm afraid as a citizen, we can only ask questions. Ask questions boldly, and more citizens asking the question would be better. But there's also something else. There are, after all, the model code of conduct was meant to uphold some norms over and above the laws. We as citizens can become custodians of those norms. We can say, giving these many rupees, whether it's the Jharkhand government which does it or the Maharashtra government which does it, we can say this is bribery. We do not take bribes before election. You have a lovely scheme. You think all the women are Ladli Bahinas, great idea. Bring it in the governor's address, make it a part of your budget, create a scheme, start doing it. Doing it 2 months before the election, I'm afraid, is bribery. I won't take it. Or to say, if you speak the way you're speaking, Mr. Hemanta Biswa Sarma, don't come and create such disturbance in my state. So in the last instance, democracy degenerates because we, the citizen, allow it to degenerate, because we reward political leaders who bring democracy down. So in the last instance, citizen can uphold those norms. In the last instance, no politician would wish to say things which would lose their votes. We can come down on that. That's what we can do as a citizen. This is no quick fix formula. It's not an overnight recipe. But in the last instance, that's what we can do.
Right. Thank you. Thank you so much, sir, for another great conversation. I would like to also thank our viewers for watching this video, and for more news and views from the Indian Express, please do remember to like and subscribe our channel.